Welcome back to another edition of PSR Sports Talk here on Penn Sports Radio. I'm Scott Johnston, the program director at the station, and today we're talking football. I'm happy to be joined by Tim McGorry, the second-year head coach at Allentown Central Catholic. Coach, it's good to see you, and our first question we always like to ask of our guests that we invite on our show is, how are you and your family doing during this time? I know this pandemic started about the second week of March, and right now we're getting into late July. Football season is right around the corner, but how are things in the McGorry household as we speak?
Healthy, so that's a positive thing. And me and my wife we have a 3-year-old daughter, so my wife works at St. Luke's, so I was home with her, March, April, May into June before we kind of got started here. So there was a lot of quality time at home, doing some different things that I'm used to. But it was fun, and everybody's healthy, so that's what's important.
What were some of the biggest challenges you faced being at home so much, Tim? I mean, it's always nice to spend time with family, but as we are in the summertime right now, I'm sure your team would be into 7-on-7s and doing a lot of lifting. What were some of those challenges that you had to face back in March when you knew that, spring sports were canceled, and now your team has just started up doing workouts for football?
Sure, I think probably like everybody else, and a lot of friends a lot of close friends that coach at the next level. So getting some information what they were doing and talking to some other guys in the area. My initial impulse was to rush in and make sure we had Zoom meetings set up and how we're working out and how to. But then really just like the fact, just kind of seeing my own life change, being home with a 3-year-old all of a sudden and things like that, we actually went the other way. And for the first 2 weeks kind of backed off our guys just to let them get used to being at home and, how school was going to be operated. So we really, I think that those first 2 weeks that we were home in March, we stayed in touch with our guys, but we kind of just let it go. So they could adapt and not feel overwhelmed. And we needed to get a sense, too, as a staff of, how much do we want to, if what we're doing on a Zoom session is in March or in early April, how much is that going to help us in September? So trying to be really efficient with everybody's time as well. And then I think, taking that time, let us do some creative things to be able to stay in touch with our players and things like that. So I think it was just the hardest thing for me was taking the step back and kind of just letting it go for 2 weeks to adjust. But I think that was the right move, and it let us put in some, like I said, some creative things and maybe be a little bit more efficient with everybody's time.
Now, this pandemic has affected everybody in a lot of different ways, and depending upon what news channel you watch, whether it's CNN or Fox, you hear a lot of different opinions and numbers and so forth. You mentioned your wife working at St. Luke's. Can you share with our viewers how it's been for you, given the fact that you have a wife working in healthcare? What type of stories has she shared with you about people that maybe she has dealt with that have gotten the virus there, that are patients that have to be treated at St. Luke's? I mean, what are you hearing?
Sure. Well, legally she can't really tell me anything.
Right.
But,
Yeah.
So as we were, probably like the end of March and into the middle of April, it was just seeing the amount of hours she was working and how different it was from normally, and kind of look on her face a little bit. It was definitely some scary things, running through my mind. But I think then as everybody became a little bit more educated about it and things like that, we start to understand some things and about the virus. It's decreased, certainly a little bit, but early on, seeing how what the daily struggle was like from that standpoint was definitely scary.
So your team is currently going through workouts right now. You're a couple weeks in. When the PIAA came out with the guidelines, and then of course those guidelines were handed down to each school, so the schools and their health provider had to come up with a plan. What was your initial reaction, Tim, when you saw all the protocols that were in place in order for, in your case, with being the head football coach at Central, how did you handle that with your team when you just looked at everything that has to be covered on your coaching staff to all these players in order to have safe practices. I mean, it's a very detailed report. Did it seem overwhelming at first, just looking at it and seeing like, wow, we have to do this, this, and this in order to get back to doing just workouts?
Sure. I think, initially it was a little daunting just looking at this, these documents and thinking, how are we going to do this? Or, but, again, like we were able to kind of as a staff sit down and throw some ideas out. So I think we were a little bit, again, creative in that sense where we were able to get maybe a little bit more done by doing some different things. But when you first looked at it, I know some of the NFL guys have said the same thing. Like it's almost like it's not possible, but we work around it, you figure it out, and that's what we've been able to do. So, if we're going to be able to play, we've got to be able to demonstrate during this time that we can make it safe, or it's not going to work in August, September, and October.
So you're a few weeks into your workouts right now. How are things going so far as with the kids, and give us an update on the number of kids that have reported to camp right now? And
Sure. Well, I think the number one thing, and we're really, really lucky in this sense, is we have a great group of seniors, a big senior class. There's a lot of leadership, a lot of guys that played a lot for us last year. So, I'd say the majority of, nobody's been through this before. So I don't know if anybody knew what to expect when you saw your kids for the first time was going to be 5-6 kids thrown up from, doing something, what was it going to look like? But, after the first day, maybe we thought we made things a little too easy. And then the second day, and then as we kind of got into this, it was pretty evident that there wasn't a huge drop-off. It wasn't as if you could tell that we missed this big chunk of time with them. They did a great job of getting themselves organized in groups, and each guy would send a video of himself working out each day, get it to their group leader. They were getting it to the coach in charge and things like that. So, there's certainly that worry when you're not around them. Are they doing stuff? And it was great to see that, that the majority of our guys have, we're doing stuff throughout the entire quarantine or shelter in place phase. And they came back and it showed the last 2-3 weeks we've been out there.
I know off the air you had mentioned to me in discussing about the workouts that your players came back in pretty good shape. Was that a surprise to you, considering these student athletes had been home for a couple months? I mean, I'm sure that had to be a nice surprise to see all the players coming to camp in pretty good shape.
Yeah, it was certainly pleasing. I think it's our seniors, and they're really good leaders, and they've done a great job at communicating throughout the entire team of making sure we had a lot of different things at different weeks. Some weeks it was filming a workout, and some weeks we did push-up challenges or whatever it may be. And each senior was able to be a leader and make sure that the younger guys got everything on film and sent back. And so I think coming back in that shape is really a great tribute to our leaders.
Talking here with Tim McGorry, the second-year head coach at Allentown Central Catholic, here on PSR Sports Talks here on Penn Sports Radio. Please visit our website, pennsportsradio.com. We have a lot of great content on there, and you can also follow us on Twitter at pen_.radio. Also like us on Facebook, and you can download our free app as well. On Android or Apple device, you'll be able to listen to a lot of Central Catholic football games this fall, keeping our fingers crossed that there is going to be a season. And Coach, that leads me right to my next question for you. Again, we're getting at the end of July as we're filming this today. August 10th is heat acclimation. How optimistic do you remain that we're going to have fall sports, and especially football, in the fall?
Yeah, so I think obviously with all the since March we've had nothing but questions about and it kind of wears you out a little bit. So
yeah.
I kind of made the decision. I said it to our staff and really to the team even before we were able to get back together. Like we're done trying to think of all these different scenarios and things like that. It's really a waste of time. So all we've really focused on is and it sounds like a cliche, but just getting better each day. And that's who we are as a program. We're process oriented and not result oriented. And the PIAA is is going to give us guidance. And as of right now, we're planning to be there August 10th because that's what they've told us, and we'll adjust as needed. But that's not something we can spend a lot of time focusing on.
And if there is a football season, Coach, there's always been a lot of talk about fans, perhaps no fans or a limited amount of people in the stands for football games this fall. Would Tim McGorry be okay with playing football in the fall and not having fans at J. Bernie Crum Stadium for your home games?
Well, I think you have to be. I think you have to be at this point. Certainly, and there's other programs in our league as well. But we get a good amount of people, a pretty good following of our program, and there's certainly you'll lose that part of it. But at the end of the day, this is about the kids getting the opportunity to compete. So you have to be okay with nobody there and to give those guys the opportunity to compete.
So on the football field, your team. In your first year, you went 8-5, which was a big improvement from 2018 when the team was 3-8. How would you describe last year overall, Coach? You got to the district final, losing to Pottsville, but you had to be pleased overall with how your first season went and just the direction that this program is going.
Sure. Well, I think it wasn't. We kept telling the players it wasn't going to be. There was no magic scheme or coaching technique that's going to change. We're not going to be the ones that change this. It's got to be you. All we can do is put in place is a culture of accountability. And I think the players and in particular the seniors bought into it. We were going to be harder on them. We were going to demand more out of them, and especially in the weight room. And that's if it was going to start anywhere, that's where it needed to start. And they did a great job of buying into that and leading by example, which just kind of filtered through the program. So, I don't think that, again, those guys, they changed it. They changed the culture. All we did was put, some things in place from holding each other accountable and the way we're going to practice and the way we want to play. But at the end of the day, the players have to do it. And they did an outstanding job just buying into everything we wanted to do as a staff.
And looking back on your results from last year, in your 13 games, I noted that you had a lot of close games. I believe 6 games decided by 8 points or less. Your team went 4-2. Lost a tough one to Parkland, 14-8. I know there was a lot of talk about some questionable officiating, and I won't get into that. But then you also lost to a very good Freedom team, 34-31. Your team was in a lot of games last year, other than the Nazareth game. They were very competitive.
Yeah, and I think that's all we want. We touched on it earlier. We don't talk about results very often. We don't talk about championships or anything like that. It's about treating each play as that it has a life and history of its own, and that's what we've kind of tried to impress upon them. And for the most part, I think we kind of learned that lesson a little bit early on in the season. With we played Parkland, pretty close, and we're competitive with them. And then the next week you turn around and Nazareth mercy rules you. So I think, as a program, the kids learn something that it's not, hey, you can't get up for 2 or 3 games. It's the entire league. Anybody can beat you on any given night. So I think once they kind of learned that lesson, things started to move in a positive direction.
A couple of weeks ago, we had your senior standout quarterback, Matt Rauscher, on one of our Zoom sessions. And I had asked Matt, was there any one game last year that stood out to him? And one of them I brought up was the Emmaus game. Matt had 4 touchdowns that game, 2 passing, 2 rushing. And, oh, by the way, you went over to Emmaus's East Penn School District Stadium and spoiled their homecoming too. Does that game stick out to you last year, Coach, or is there maybe another game that you were just really proud of how your team played? Or
yeah, well, I think that the Emmaus game is finally maybe when it started to click for us a little bit offensively. I think as a unit defensively, we played extremely well. 95% of the year. So I think offensively, that's kind of maybe where some things started to click in that Emmaus game. Certainly Matt played well, as you said. But that kind of, I think that maybe, if anything, we struggled early in the year, putting the ball in the end zone. We put some drives together and couldn't punch it in. So I think more than anything that Emmaus game from an offensive standpoint gave us some confidence moving forward into playing some of these other teams. But I just to go out and compete every week and no matter who we're playing, I think that's important. So really that whole back half of the season, I think the wins and the losses of it were extremely important for us as a program.
And Matt, of course, is a key returnee to this team, along with a number of other players. Who are some of the other impact players? Again, if we do have football in the fall, Tim, that you expect us to really step up for this Central Catholic team?
Yeah, well, I think we're really, really fortunate, and I think we bring 6 or 7 guys back on offense and 7 or 8 guys back on defense. So we're really fortunate to have a lot of guys back. But obviously, we talked about Matt, but I think offensively it starts with Jaden Williams, our running back. He had an exceptional year last year. We expect a lot of big things out of him again. Leroy Johnston, who gets some carries at tailback and is a linebacker for us, and he's an exceptional football player. On the offensive line, AJ Cologne's a returning starter. John Fifield's a returning starter. Christian Spagnardi, is a big tight end we have coming back on offense. And then, kind of where we take a little bit of a hit is that receiver and DB, and we bring back Jack McGorry in both spots. And then on defense, Levon Johnson in the middle. So the D-line, I think, is a strength. I think we have 5 or 6 guys that can rotate and play there. And then at linebacker, Nate Cordova, who played a lot of snaps for us last year. Juan Torres, who started throughout the playoffs for us. Mason Maxim, again, who's going in. He's going to end up being a 3-year starter. So we bring back a lot of guys that played a ton of snaps for us this past season.
So with all that talent coming back, it's likely that the Vikings are going to have the bullseye on their back heading into the season. How do you think your players are going to respond to that, Coach McGorry, as far as the lofty expectations on this team?
Sure. Well, I think the number one thing is, and we talked about it in January when we came back, it's not going to be easier this time around.
Right.
It's going to be harder than a year ago, and it's every week in our league in the East Penn Conference South. I think everybody's extremely well coached. There's great athletes. Everybody's a physical football team. So it's not necessarily maybe having the target on your back. Now it's got to be about being able to step into a 12-round fight every single week in the league and be able to go toe-to-toe. But, certainly the expectations that maybe some people on the outside have of us and really understanding that it's going to be harder than it was a year ago.
You'll open up the season August 28th, hosting Deerf at J. Bernie Crum Stadium, and then September 4th you'll be traveling to Liberty. I'm not sure if the schedule makers did you any favors, but what are your thoughts when you take a look at September 12th home against Emmaus, September 19th you're playing Easton at Lafayette, the following week you host Parkland, and then the next 2 weeks, oh, by the way, you got to go to Freedom and at Nazareth. That's a grind.
Yeah, it's a grind for sure. And I think all of us in the South, we all have that point in our schedule where you kind of look at it and you're like, but again, we all have those stretches where you're playing the Easton, Parklands, Freedoms, Bethlehem Catholic. There's really nobody in the South, I think, that can't beat somebody on any night. It's a very physical league. It's a very well coached league. So everybody has that grind on their schedule.
And speaking of the league, Tim, what are your thoughts on returning talent? I know Nazareth won a District 11 Class 6A championship a year ago. You guys were in the finals. Who are some of the teams that you expect? I mean, when it comes to Lehigh Valley football, the names that jump out automatically are your Parklands, your Eastons. Really, Freedom has done a really nice job the last couple of years. What are your thoughts on who you expect to be strong this fall?
Yeah, I think the thing that kind of jumps out is I think everybody's got a tailback.
Yeah.
That's a really good player coming back, and Easton obviously brings back maybe the best player in the league.
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of look around the league, the Parklands, Emmaus, Freedom, they're outstanding, well-coached programs, and when they lose guys, they seem to be able to replace them. So I think we all kind of fall into that spot again. I'm sure Whitehall will take a step forward in year 2 with Matt. So it's really, in the league, this is I don't know if there's a clear-cut favorite. When you look around the league, you can find a winner in probably almost everybody.
And wrapping up our session here with Tim McGorry, the second-year head coach at Central Catholic. I'm Scott Johnston, the program director for Penn Sports Radio. We will be carrying a number of Central Catholic football games this fall, as long as there is a fall sports season. So if you can't get to a game, you can listen to a lot of Vikings football, both home and away, this coming season. Coach, just 2 final questions for you. We talked about your quarterback, Matt Rauscher. How have you seen him develop since he became a starting signal caller there at Central Catholic? And what are your expectations for him in his senior season?
Sure. Well, I think the biggest thing that's changed about Matt, and we kind of joke about it now, but it was maybe a little bit more serious of a little tiff between us early on, is Matt's a really good athlete, and he kind of thought he was this outside the pocket type of quarterback, but kind of settling him down, keeping him in the pocket, understanding how all those things of play action and not just kind of, improvising, but going the other way and being a little bit more, stern with the offense and not trying to ad lib as much was going to help him and not hurt him. So I think when he bought into that concept that, it wasn't just about running around and being an athlete, he started to constantly take steps forward. And I think he got better. 2 games that stick out and with how well he played was, the Emmaus game and the Becca game. He kind of, was certainly the reason we ended up winning those games, and we had a lot of success offensively. So, he just, I think he's done a great job. He's an excellent leader. He's a phenomenal kid. This year, I think it's just taken another step forward. I think, I don't know how many interceptions he had last year, but I know the bulk of them came in 2 games. So I think he can eliminate, some of those mistakes in the turnover category moving forward. But he just needs to continue to progress each day. He does a great job. He's an outstanding football player, and I think his best football is ahead of him.
And my final question for you, I'll give you the opportunity to plug the golf outing coming up for Central Catholic. That's on August 8th, and you told me before we came on today that you've gotten a lot of support from sponsors. I mean, that has to be very encouraging during these times to see sponsors really step up, and I'm sure that's just going to be a fun day for all when you get together at Shepherd Hills for that golf outing. Yeah,
this is I think the 11th year. Harold started it when he was the head coach here.
Mm-hmm.
And, I know it's grown. It grew under John Couples to be a pretty big event, and to look on that and see all the getting sponsorships was something we weren't really counting on, because of given the pandemic and some things that businesses are going through. But a lot of we've gotten a lot of support from local businesses that support our program, and it's been a really great event and a lot of fun, and a lot of football alums, a lot of guys that I played with and things like that. So it's been an outstanding event, and we're excited that we're able to reschedule it and have it August 8th.
Will Coach McGorry be playing in that golf outing, and what type of handicap does he have?
I don't know. We don't need to get into handicaps. It's better than Coach Fairclough's. That's not setting the bar.
All right. I'm sure Coach Fairclough will appreciate that if he watches this session. But Coach McGorry, it was really a pleasure talking with you today. We're keeping our fingers crossed that there's going to be a football season in the fall, and we look forward to covering Central Catholic. We know there's a lot of expectations, and we're hoping for good things. So again, thanks for your time today.
All right. Thanks for having me, Scott.